So, something I've been really wrestling with lately is how different presidents, with their own styles and all, how do they deal with those really tricky diplomatic situations, especially with someone like Putin? It's a tough one.
It is, and it's something that's obviously getting a lot of attention right now.
For sure. And thankfully, we've got Bob Woodward's new book, War, to kind of dig into that. He always seems to get those inside stories.
He does. He's got a knack for it.
And in War, he really gets into how Trump and Biden, their approaches to Putin and Russia, how different they really were.
Yeah, and you can see those different approaches right from the beginning, even before any of the current stuff.
Totally. And speaking of the beginning, Woodward drops this bombshell right away. Trump, after leaving office, had multiple secret phone calls with Putin. Secret.
Yeah, that was a big one. And it's not just the secrecy, though obviously that raises red flags.
Right, because what are you trying to hide?
Exactly. But it also raises some serious legal questions, specifically about this thing called the Logan Act.
Oh, right. I vaguely remember hearing about that.
Basically, it says private citizens, and especially former government officials, can't just conduct foreign policy without authorization.
So like going rogue.
Exactly. It's meant to prevent rogue diplomacy.
Makes sense.
The big question, though, is what was said on those calls? Did it cross that Logan Act line?
That's what we all want to know. And it's not just the secret phone calls. Woodward also points out that Trump often praised Putin publicly, even during the Ukraine invasion.
Yeah, that was interesting.
To say the least. Like, Woodward quotes Trump from a radio interview saying Putin's moves in Ukraine were, and I quote, genius. I mean, how do you even interpret that?
Well, it suggests, at a minimum, a level of admiration for Putin's leadership style, which, let's be honest, leans toward authoritarianism. And that gets really interesting when you remember Trump promised to end the war in Ukraine quickly if he was reelected. It makes you wonder what those negotiations would look like. What would he be willing to concede? It raises all sorts of questions about what a Trump foreign policy would look like in action, not just on the campaign trail.
Okay, so we've been talking about Trump's approach, but what did Biden do? I mean, Woodward paints a completely different picture there, right? Especially when it comes to that terrifying possibility of like a nuclear standoff with Russia.
Yeah, no kidding. It's pretty chilling stuff.
Seriously.
And it's interesting. Woodward draws this parallel between how Biden handled things and how JFK dealt with the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's kind of portraying Biden as this steady hand.
Yeah.
Someone who doesn't lose it under pressure, which, I mean, kind of important when you're dealing with potential Armageddon.
Yeah, just a little bit. And it sounds like the pressure was definitely on. Woodward talks about how the Biden administration was getting these really scary intelligence reports.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't just a general worry about Putin and nukes. It was that their assessment of the actual likelihood of him using them, it went way up, like practically overnight.
Really? How much are we talking here?
Like a 10-fold increase.
Wow.
Yeah, from a 5% chance to a 50% chance of Russia using tactical nuclear weapons.
Okay, so to be clear, we're talking tactical nuclear weapons here. So not the big city-destroying ones, but still.
Right, exactly. Tactical nukes are meant for battlefield use. But even on a smaller scale, we're talking about devastating consequences. It was a huge red flag that this threat was real, and it was immediate.
So facing down a potential nuclear attack, how did Biden respond?
Well, Woodward says that Biden immediately got his team together and told them to open up direct lines of communication with the Kremlin.
So, like, ready to negotiate over Ukraine.
Not so fast. He wasn't interested in negotiating over Ukraine at that point. He just wanted to make sure each side understood what was at stake here.
Like, hey guys, this could be bad for everyone.
Exactly. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about preventing something truly catastrophic.
Makes sense.
And that's a really key difference between Biden and Trump's approach. I mean, Biden, at least as Woodward tells it, he's focused on preventing a larger conflict, but he's still holding firm on Russia's aggression.
So walk us through how that works. How do you do both of those at the same time?
Well, Woodward actually quotes Biden giving his team instructions. Yeah. He says to use language that is threatening without being directly threatening.
Okay, so how do you actually say that? What does that even look like?
It's a tightrope walk for sure.
Definitely.
But from Woodward's account, it seems like that's exactly what Biden was able to do.
So they're talking to Russia, trying to make it clear that this is serious, but not so serious that it sets them off.
Right, and Woodward goes into detail about some of the back and forth between the two sides. Yeah. It got pretty intense.
I bet.
Like, at one point, there's this moment where Defense Secretary Austin is talking to his Russian counterpart, and he just lays it out. He says, and I quote, "Look, A nuclear war is unwinnable for everyone. Let's not even entertain that thought.
I mean, can you imagine being in the room for that conversation?
In tanks.
Totally. And Austin didn't stop there.
Oh.
He also made it very clear that if Russia did use nuclear weapons, even those smaller tactical ones, there would be consequences. Serious ones.
Like what?
He said that everything would be on the table, that all the restraints on U.S. actions up to that point, they'd be gone. It was a stark warning.
So they're having these super tense conversations trying to prevent a nuclear disaster, but it doesn't end there, does it?
No, not even close. Just a couple of days after Austin's warning, Russia actually tried to turn the tables.
Oh no! How?
They contacted the U.S. claiming that Ukraine was planning to use a dirty bomb. You know, a conventional bomb, but with radioactive material added. A dirty bomb. Wow. That's scary stuff.
It is, but it's also pretty transparent. The U.S. saw right through it.
So it was bogus.
It seemed like it. Most likely a classic case of projection, trying to create an excuse for escalating the conflict themselves.
So just more of that disinformation that seems to always be swirling around in these situations.
Exactly. And that's where Biden's experience, his ability to see through that kind of stuff, it becomes really crucial.
Because it'd be so easy to be pulled into that, to react without thinking.
Right, and that's exactly what Russia wants, probably. But Woodward shows how Biden recognized it for what it was, a tactic straight from the disinformation playbook.
So how did he respond? Did he call them out on it?
He didn't take the bait. He doubled down on de-escalation, kept those lines of communication open.
So even with all that pressure, he's still trying to find a way to keep things from boiling over.
It seems that way, yeah. And this actually connects to something else Woodward brings up, something about Biden's view of how Obama handled things back in 2014 with the whole Crimea situation.
Oh, interesting. Because obviously that was a big deal, Russia annexing Crimea. How did Biden feel about it?
Well, Woodward quotes Biden talking about it, saying, "That's why we are here. We fucked it up."
Wow, he really said that about Obama.
That's what Woodward says. And it's not just a throwaway comment. He goes on to say, Barack never took Putin seriously. We gave Putin license to continue. Well, I'm revoking his fucking license.
Wow. I mean, you can definitely hear the frustration there.
Absolutely. But it also shows you how different their approaches were, Obama and Biden, at least when it comes to dealing with Putin.
Right. So in this situation, it seems like Biden was determined to not let Putin walk all over him, especially not with these kinds of stakes.
Exactly. And it really highlights just how consequential these different approaches can be, right?
Yeah.
You've got Trump on one side, seemingly admiring Putin, even praising his tactics. Then you have Biden on the other, facing down a potential nuclear crisis, refusing to back down, but also being incredibly careful not to escalate things.
It's a stark contrast. And it really makes you think about how those two different playbooks, how they play out on the world stage, what the consequences are.
Absolutely. And it's not just about Trump and Biden. It's a reminder that these different approaches to dealing with a power like Russia, they're still at play.
Which is kind of a scary thought when you really think about it.
It's definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Because those decisions, they impact all of us.
For sure. So where does that leave us?
Well, we're left with a lot to think about, that's for sure. We've got these two contrasting figures, Trump and Biden, each with their own way of approaching things. And their legacies, their actions, they continue to have a ripple effect on the world.
And their approaches are still very relevant today, especially with everything that's going on in Ukraine.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that it's on all of us to try to understand these issues, to ask tough questions, to be informed, because ultimately, the decisions made by our leaders, they affect us all.
Well said. And that's really what we're trying to do here, to dig into these complex issues, to have these conversations. So thank you for taking the time to break all of this down with us. It's been enlightening, to say the least.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll be back next week with another topic and another expert, so be sure to tune in for that. Until then, keep asking those tough questions.